Okay, this is the second reading in our series of Buddhist sutras. First we did the Heart Sutra, and now we will do the Diamond Sutra, which in Japanese is Kongō-kyō, or the long version is Kongō-kyō. And we will be reading Burton Watson's translation, and he bases his translation on, there are many versions of the text, he bases his translation on the version found in Hanya Shingyo Kongo Hanya Kyo, is the title of the book, which is annotated by Nakamura Hajime and Kino Kazuyoshi, as Watson mentions in his translation. And I'll put the link to Watson's translation in the description. It's been made available by JSTOR. He has an article or an explanation of the text in the first 13 pages, and then the text itself is the remaining, 22 pages or so. So I'll read his English translation now, and I'll make a second video on this text with the study guide. And I'll explain the study guide, which provides the background information and textual analysis and tools and so forth. But in this video I'm just going to read the text, the Diamond Sutra, translated by the Indian Tripitaka master of the Yao Qing dynasty. This is what I heard. The Buddha was once in the Jetavana monastery in Sravisti, accompanied by 1,250 major disciples. At that time, the world-honored one, when mealtime came, put on his robe, took his begging bowl in hand, and went into the city of Sravasti to beg for food. He then returned to the monastery, and when he had finished eating, put away his robe and begging bowl, washed his feet, spread his sitting mat, and sat down. 2. Because each section or episode is numbered here. At that time, the elder monk Subhuti, who was among the disciples, having risen from his seat, bared his right shoulder, pressed his right knee to the ground, brought his palms together in a gesture of reverence, and addressed the Buddha in these words. How rare and wonderful, world-honored one, the way the thus come one, or Nyorai, carefully takes thought of the bodhisattvas, how he carefully gives instruction to the bodhisattvas. World-honored one, if these good men and good women wish to set their minds on the attainment of supreme and perfect enlightenment, how should they live? How should they discipline their minds? The Buddha said, Excellent, excellent, Subhuti. It is just as you say, how the thus come one carefully takes thought of the bodhisattvas, how he carefully gives instructions to the bodhisattvas. Now you must listen carefully, and I will explain to you how good men and good women who wish to set their minds on the attainment of supreme and perfect enlightenment should live, and how they should discipline their minds. By all means, world-honored one, I am eager to hear it. 3. Then the Buddha said to Subhuti, the bodhisattvas, the mahasattvas, should train their minds to think in this way. All living creatures, whether born from eggs or from the womb, whether produced from moisture or from transformation, whether they have form or are without form, whether they have thought or without thought, and are neither with or without thought, all these I will cause to pass over into the extinction of the nirvana of no remainder. There's a footnote about that, you can read that on your own. In this way I will cause an immeasurable, a countless, a boundless number of living creatures to enter extinction. And yet, in truth, no living creature will be enabled to enter extinction. Why? Because, Subhuti, if the bodhisattvas entertain any thought of something that has the marks of a self, something that has the marks of a being, something that has the marks of a living creature, or something that has the marks of an individual, then they are not bodhisattvas. Another footnote there, you can confirm the footnote when you read it. 4. Next, Subhuti, when the bodhisattvas carrying out almsgiving, they should have no feelings of attachment to a dharma or thing. Another footnote there about the dharma and the perfections. They should have no attachment regarding the color or form of their almsgiving. Color or form, as we saw in the first reading, was as shiki in Japanese, and Chinese, 四. They should have no attachment regarding the sound, scent, taste, feel, or dharma nature of their almsgiving. Subhuti, the bodhisattvas should carry out almsgiving in this way, paying no mind to the form it may take. Why? Because if the bodhisattvas pay no mind to the form in their almsgiving, then the good fortune they receive will be beyond measuring. Subhuti, what do I mean by this? The limits of the eastern sky, can they be measured? No, world-honored one. Subhuti, can the limits of the sky to the south, the west, the north, the sky in the four directions, or up and down, can they be measured? No, world-honored one. Subhuti, when the bodhisattvas bestow alms without thinking about the form, then the good fortune they receive will in the same way be beyond measuring. Subhuti, the bodhisattvas have only to deal with attachment in the manner that I have taught them. 5. And Subhuti, what do you think? Can the thus come one be seen in terms of his bodily marks? No, world-honored one. The thus come one cannot be seen in terms of bodily marks. Why? Because the thus come one has said that bodily marks are in fact no bodily marks. Okay, thus come one, there's a glossary at the end that I'm going to read. It will explain this important term, thus come one, the Nyorai. And the Nyorai is, of course, the highest ranking entity or being within the Buddhist cosmology, above the bodhisattvas, right? The thus come one has already attained total enlightenment and no longer deals with the unenlightened. No, world-honored, the thus come one cannot be seen in terms of body. Why? Because the thus come one has said that bodily marks are in fact no bodily marks. The Buddha then said to Subhuti, wherever there are such bodily marks, in every case there are all empty falsehoods. But if one sees that bodily marks are no bodily marks, then one sees the thus come one. 6. Subhuti then said to the Buddha, world-honored one, if living beings hear pronouncements and passages of scripture such as this, will they be able to believe and have faith in them? The Buddha said to Subhuti, you must not speak in such a way. In the latter 500-year period after the Buddha has passed into nirvana, those who abide by the precepts and seek good fortune, encountering these passages of scripture, will be able to embrace them with a believing mind and accept them as a truth. The latter day of the law is explained in the glossary. I'll get to that below. For you should understand that these persons have not planted the seeds of good understanding under one Buddha, 2 Buddhas, or 3, 4, or 5 Buddhas. They have already planted the seeds of good understanding under countless thousands and 10,000s of Buddhas. When they hear passages of scripture such as this, they will accept them at once with the purest faith. Subhuti, the thus come one in all cases knows and in all cases has seen how these living beings have in this way gone about gaining unlimited good fortune. How do I know this? Because they never entertain the thought of a self, a being, a living creature, or an individual, nor the thought of a dharma, or of what is not a dharma. Why do I say this? Because if any of these living beings in their minds had seized upon such a thought, then they would be clinging to the concept of a self, a being, a living creature, or an individual. And if by entertaining such a thought they would be clinging to the concept of a self, a being, a living creature, or an individual, then what follows? If they entertain the thought of that which is not a dharma, they would likewise be clinging to the concept of a self, a being, a living creature, or an individual. Therefore, one should not seize on the idea of a dharma, or on the idea of what is not a dharma. This is the reason why the thus come one constantly declares that you monks should understand this, that the teachings I expound are to be likened to a raft. Okay, a raft is a motif, an image that you see in Buddhist texts quite often. Underline this word, a raft. The idea of a dharma must be cast aside, to say nothing of the idea of what is not a dharma. So the dharma is simply a hoben, an expedient means, he is saying. 7. Subhuti, what do you think? Does the thus come one attain supreme and perfect enlightenment? Does the thus come one preach that it is a dharma? Subhuti replied in these words, if I have understood the meaning of the Buddhist preaching, he has never posited the existence of a particular dharma such as supreme and perfect enlightenment. The thus come one has never posited the existence of any particular dharma at all. Why? because the dharmas that the Buddha expounds are in all cases not something that can be acquired, not something that can be expounded. They are not dharmas, and they are not dharmas. Why do I say this? Because all the wise and holy ones in all cases deal in an unconditional dharma that is expressed in terms of the conditional. Again, a very obscure sentence. There's a note about that. Other interpretations are possible. Number 8. Subhuti, what do you think? If a person were to fill the 1,000,000,000-fold world with the 7 treasures, note about that, as an offering of alms, that person would gain great fortune, would he not? Subhuti replied, very great good fortune, world-honored one. Why? Because such good fortune does not partake of the nature of good fortune. Therefore the thus come one has said that such a person attains great good fortune. But, the Buddha said, if persons accept so much as one 4-line verse from this sutra and expound it to others, then the good fortune they receive is even greater. Why? Subhuti, all the dharmas of the Buddhas and of the supreme and perfect enlightenment of the Buddhas, all these derive from this sutra. Subhuti, what are called Buddha dharmas are in fact not Buddha dharmas. 9. Subhuti, what do you think? Can those who are stream winners think to themselves, I have attained the level of stream winner, or can they not? There's in the glossary an explanation about the stream winner. And the first is one who has entered the Hinayana path to enlightenment, is the stream winner. Subhuti replied, no, they cannot, world-honored one. Why? Because the term stream winner means one who has entered the stream. But there is no such stream to enter. Such a person does not enter the stream of forms, sounds, scents, tastes, feelings, or dharmas. This is called a stream winner. Subhuti, what do you think? Can those who are once returners think to themselves, I have attained the level of once returner, or can they not? Subhuti replied, once returner is someone who returns once more. The second of the 4 kinds of Hinayama disciples, one who has attained a stage subject to rebirth only once more in each of the human and heavenly realms before attaining final emancipation. So it's the penultimate existence in this life. The once returners, they come back once more, and then they're done, and they go on to Nehang, Nirvana. I have attained the level, or can they not? Subhuti replied, no, they cannot, world-honored one. Why? Because a once returner is one who returns only once more. But in fact, there is no returning. This is called a once returner. Subhuti, what do you think? Can those who are non-returners think to themselves, I have attained the level of non-returner, or can they not? Subhuti replied, no, they cannot, world-honored one. Why? Because a non-returner is one who does not return. But in fact, there is no such thing as returning. This is called a non-returner. Subhuti, what do you think? Can those who are arhats, which are the wise ones, who have attained not enlightenment, but extreme erudition and knowledge through study, that's an explanation in the glossary, I'll get to that later. Can those who are arhats think to themselves, I have attained the level of arhat, or can they not? Subhuti replied, no, they cannot, world-honored one. Why? Because in fact there is no such thing called an arhat. World-honored one, if arhats thought to themselves, I have attained the level of arhat, then they would be clinging to the concept of a self, a being, a living creature, an individual. World-honored one, you, the Buddha, have declared that I deserve to be called foremost among those in strifeless concentration, that I am foremost among arhats free of desire. But I never think to myself, I am an arhat free of desire. World-honored one, if I thought to myself, I have attained the arhat path, then the world-honored one would not have said to me, Subhuti delights in carrying out the practice of strifeless concentration. Because for Subhuti there is in fact no such practice. I declare that Subhuti delights in the practice of strifeless concentration. There's a note there about this term, this technical term, strifeless concentration. You can read it on your own. 10. The Buddha said to Subhuti, what do you think? Did the thus come one in the past gain any dharma from the Buddha Dipamkara, or did he not gain any dharma? World-honored one, when the thus come one was with the Buddha Dipankara, in fact he did not gain any dharma. Subhuti, what do you think? Do the bodhisattvas adorn the Buddha lands or do they not? No, world-honored one. Why? Because to adorn the Buddha lands is not to adorn them. This is called adorning. Therefore, Subhuti, the bodhisattvas, the mahasattvas, should in this way cultivate minds that are pure and clear, and should not cultivate minds that are attached to forms, shiki, Japanese, su, Chinese, nor should they cultivate those that are attached to sound, scent, taste, feeling, or dharmas. They should cultivate minds that are attached to nothing. Subhuti, suppose there was a person whose body was the size of a Sumeru, the king of mountains. What do you think? Could such a body be called big or not? Subhuti replied, very big, world-honored one. Why? Because the Buddha has said that what is not a body, this is called a big body. 11. Subhuti, suppose there were as many Ganges rivers as there are sands in the Ganges. And suppose one counted all the grains of sand in all these Ganges. What do you think? Would the sands of these Ganges be many or not? Subhuti replied, very many, world-honored one. The number of Ganges rivers alone would be too many to be counted, to say nothing of the sands in them. Subhuti, I will now tell you the truth of the matter. If good men and good women should take the 7 treasures and using them as alms, fill as many 1,000,000,000-fold worlds as there are sands in the Ganges, would they gain great good fortune or would they not? Subhuti replied, very great, world-honored one. The Buddha then said to Subhuti, if good men and good women should accept and uphold just one 4-line verse from this sutra and teach it to the others, then the good fortune they gained would be even greater. 12. Moreover, Subhuti, if someone proceeds to expound even one 4-line verse from this sutra, you should know that the place where this is done is one where all the heavenly beings, human beings and asuras in the world should offer alms as they would to a stupa of the Buddha. A stupa is the... Okay, there's a note about the stupa there, you can read that on your own. And how much more is this? So if that person is fully able to accept, uphold, read, and recite the sutra. Subhuti, you should know that such a person brings to fulfillment the foremost, the most wonderful of all teachings. And that wherever this sutra exists, it is as though the Buddha himself were there, or his most venerable disciples. 13. At that time Subhuti said to the Buddha, world-honored one, by what name should this sutra be known, and how should we honor and uphold it? The Buddha said to Subhuti, this sutra should be called the Diamond Perfection of Wisdom, and by that name you should honor and uphold it. And why is this? Subhuti, the perfection of wisdom that the Buddha expounds is not the perfection of wisdom. Subhuti, why do I say this? Does the thus come one expound the existence of dharmas, or does he not? Subhuti said to the Buddha, world-honored one, the thus come one does not expound anything. Subhuti, what do you think? The dust particles in the 1,000,000,000-fold world, are they many or not? Subhuti replied, they are very many, world-honored one. Subhuti, these dust particles that the thus come one expounds are not dust particles. They are called dust particles. And what the thus come one expounds as a world is not a world. This is called a world. Subhuti, what do you think? Can the thus come one be seen in the 32 bodily marks? No, world-honored one. The thus come one cannot be seen in the 32 bodily marks. Why? Because the thus come one teaches us that the 32 bodily marks are not bodily marks. These are called the 32 bodily marks. Subhuti, suppose there were good men and good women who gave their bodies and lives as a form of alms given for as many times as there are sands in the Ganges. Much greater would be the good fortune gained by a person who accepted and upheld one 4-line verse of this sutra and taught it to others. 14. At that time, Subhuti, hearing the Buddha speak in such a way about this sutra, achieved a profound understanding. Shedding tears of compassion, he said to the Buddha, how rare and wonderful, world-honored one, is the way in which you expound this most profound sutra. From times past I have gained the eyes of wisdom, but I have never heard you expound a sutra such as this. World-honored one, if there are persons who hear the sutra and embrace it with the purity of a believing mind, then they will come to understand the true form of reality. One should know then that such persons will acquire the most wonderful blessings. World-honored one, this true form is not a form at all. Therefore, the thus come one expounds it, calling it the true form. World-honored one, now that I have heard you expound a sutra such as this, it is not at all difficult for me to believe, understand, accept, and uphold it. But in times to come, in the latter 500-year period, if there are living beings who are able to hear this sutra and believe, understand, accept, and uphold it, then they will be most wonderful persons indeed. Why? Because such persons will be free of the thought of the self, a being, a living creature, or an individual. Why? Because the concept of a self is not a concept at all. The concept of a being is not a concept at all. The concept of a living creature, the concept of a soul, is no concept at all. Why? Because when one has freed oneself from all such concepts of form, then the person may be called one of the Buddhas. The Buddha said to Subhuti, just so, just so. If there is a person who is able to hear this sutra without alarm, without fear, without misgivings, then you should know that this person is most wonderful. Why? Subhuti, what the thus come one expounds as the foremost perfection is not the foremost perfection. This is called the foremost perfection. Subhuti, the paramita, or perfection of forbearance, as preached by the Buddha, is not the perfection of forbearance. Why? When long ago I was subjected to bodily mutilation by King Kali, at that time I had no thought of a self, a being, a living creature, an individual. Okay, there's a note about his his bodily mutilation by King Kali. There, you can read that on your own. Why? Because at that time in the distant past, when I was being dismembered limb by limb, if I had thought of a self, a being, a living creature, or an individual, then I would have been filled with anger and hatred. Okay, get rid of the idea of the self and the individual, and you get rid of anger and hatred, which are the two of the three great poisons or vices in Buddhism. Subhuti, when I think back to those 500 years when I was an ascetic named Ksantivadin, or forbearance, at that time I had no thought of a self, a being, a living creature, or an individual. Therefore, Subhuti, bodhisattvas should free themselves from all such concepts of form, and should set their minds on the attainment of supreme and perfect enlightenment. In their minds they should have no attachment to form. In their minds they should have no attachment to sound, scent, taste, feeling, or dhammas. They should cultivate a mind that is without attachments. If their minds have attachments, these should become non-attachments. Therefore I have said that bodhisattvas should in their minds have no attachments regarding the form of their alms-giving. Subhuti, in order for bodhisattvas to profit and enrich all living beings, they should carry out their alms-giving in this manner. The thus come one preaches that all forms are in fact not forms. We saw that phrase in that formulation in the Heart Sutra already. All forms are not forms. All not forms are forms, right? And he also preaches that all living beings are not living beings. We saw that too in the Heart Sutra. Subhuti, the thus come one, speaks true words, real words, words that are so, words not wild, not deviant. Subhuti, the Dharma that the thus come one has acquired, this Dharma is without truth and without falsehood. So it transcends both. Subhuti, if bodhisattvas, when they carry out almsgiving, should in their minds have any attachment to the Dharma, they would be like persons who enter a dark place and are unable to see. But if bodhisattvas, when they carry out almsgiving, have in their minds no attachment to a Dharma, they will be like persons whose eyes are illumined by the rays of the sun and who can distinguish all kinds of color. Subhuti, in times to come, if there are good men and good women who can accept, uphold, read, and recite this sutra, then the thus come one, through his Buddha wisdom, will now recognize all of them. Will know and recognize all of them, He will see them all, and all of them will attain blessings boundless and beyond measure. 15. Subhuti. Suppose there were good men and good women who in the first part of the day gave their bodies as a kind of alms for as many times as there are sands in the Ganges. that in the middle part of the day they again gave their bodies as alms for as many times as there are sands in the Ganges, and that in the latter part of the day they once more gave their bodies as alms for as many times as there are sands in the Ganges, and they continued to give their bodies as alms for 100, 1,000, 10,000, 1,000,000 kalpas. Yeah, kalpas is sort of an eon or a long epoch, long stage division of human history, or cosmic history rather. But if there were a person who, hearing this sutra, responded with a believing mind and did not question it, then that person's good fortune would surpass that of the other persons I have described. And how much more is this so if that person copies, accepts, upholds, reads, and recites this sutra, and explains and preaches it to others. Subhuti, I speak in all earnestness. This sutra confers unimaginable, indescribable blessings, blessings that are beyond measure. The thus come one preaches it for those who would set out on the great vehicle path, who would follow the greatest vehicle of all. If there are persons who can accept, uphold, read, and recite it and expound it widely for the sake of others, the thus come one will recognize all such persons. He will see all such persons, and they will attain blessings that are boundless and beyond measure, that are unimaginable, indescribable. Persons such as these are capable of shouldering the supreme and perfect enlightenment of the thus come one. Why? Because, Subhuti, if one delights in a lesser dharma and is attached to the thought of a self, a being, a living creature, or an individual, then such a person is not capable of hearing, accepting, reading, and reciting this sutra and preaching and explaining it to others. Subhuti, whatever the place may be, if this sutra is there, then all the heavenly beings, human beings, and asuras in the world should offer alms to it. You should know that a spot is like a stupa, where all should reverently bow in obeisance, should circle it and shower it with flowers and incense. 16. Furthermore, Subhuti, when good men and good women accept, uphold, read, and recite this sutra, if they should be treated by others with derision and contempt, it is because in a past existence they created bad karma that would cause them to be reborn into an evil path. But because now in this existence they are treated by others with contempt, that bad karma from a past existence will be wiped out. Hence they will attain supreme and perfect enlightenment. Subhuti, I recall how countless asamkaiha kalpas in the past, this is a numerical unit of ancient India used to indicate large number, so a large number of kalpas in the past, before the time of the Buddha Dipamkara, I was able to encounter 800, 4,000, 10,000, 1,000,000 Nayutas of Buddhas. To each and every one of these I gave alms and served them diligently, never daring to be remiss. But if in a latter age there is a person who can receive, uphold, read and recite this sutra, the blessings that person receives will be more than 100 times the blessings I received by paying alms to all those Buddhas. Those blessings will be 1,000, 10,000, 1,000,000 times greater than it is even possible for numbers to be calculated or analogies to be expressed. Subhuti, if there are good men and good women in the latter age who accept, uphold, read, and recite this sutra, if I were to describe it in full the blessings they would receive, then people who listen to me would become confused and dumbfounded in their minds, would be doubtful and fail to believe me. Subhuti, you should understand that this sutra is indescribable in import, and the results it brings to are indescribable. 17. At that time Subhuti said to the Buddha, World-honored one, if good men and good women set their minds on the attainment of supreme and perfect enlightenment, how should they live? How should they discipline their minds? The Buddha said to Subhuti, if good men and good women hope to attain supreme and perfect enlightenment, they should cultivate minds that think in this way: I must save all living beings. And when I have saved all living beings, there will not in fact be a single living being who has been saved. Why do I say this? Contradictory statement. I added that there. That's what he means. Because, Subhuti, if the bodhisattvas have any thought of a self, a being, a living creature, or an individual, then they are not bodhisattvas. Why? Because, Subhuti, there is no such dharma as the attainment of supreme and perfect enlightenment. Subhuti, what do you think? When the thus come one was with the Buddha Dipankara, was there any such thing as the attainment of supreme and perfect enlightenment? No, world-honored one. If I have understood the meaning of the Buddha's preachings, when the Buddha was with the Buddha Dipankara, there was no such thing as the attainment of supreme and perfect enlightenment. The Buddha said, just so, just so. Subhuti, in truth there is no such thing as the thus come one's attaining supreme and perfect enlightenment. Subhuti, if there was such thing as the thus come one's attaining supreme and perfect enlightenment, then the Buddha Dipankara would not have prophesied my attainment of enlightenment, nor would he have said to me, in a future existence you will become a Buddha and will be called Sakamuni. But because in truth there is no such thing as the attainment of supreme and perfect enlightenment, therefore the Buddha Dipankara gave me a prophecy of enlightenment, saying, in a future existence you will become a Buddha called Sakamuni. Why do I say this? To the thus come one, all dharmas are thus in nature. Suppose there should be someone who says that the thus come one has attained supreme and perfect enlightenment. Subhuti, in truth there is no such thing as the attainment of supreme and perfect enlightenment. Subhuti, the supreme and perfect enlightenment that the thus come one has attained, in it there is no truth and no falsehood. Therefore the thus come one preaches that all dharmas are all of them Buddha dharmas. Subhuti, when I speak of what I speak of as all dharmas are not all dharmas, so one calls them all dharmas. Subhuti, suppose I should say it is like a person who is big and tall in body. Subhuti said, world-honored one, if the thus come one says that a person is big and tall in body, then that means that that person is not big in body. This is called a big body. Subhuti, the bodhisattvas are the same as this. If one of them were to say, I am going to save a countless number of living beings, then one could not call that person a bodhisattva. Why? Because, Subhuti, there is no such dharma called a bodhisattva. Therefore the Buddha teaches that with regard to all dharmas, there is no self, no being, no living creature, no individual. Subhuti, if a bodhisattva were to say, I will adorn the Buddha lands, he cannot be called a bodhisattva. Why? Because the Buddha teaches that to adorn the Buddha lands is not to adorn them. This is called adorning. Subhuti, if the bodhisattvas thoroughly understand that there is no such thing as a self, then the thus come one declares that they are truly worthy to be called bodhisattvas. 18. Subhuti, what do you think? Does the thus come one possess the physical eye? Okay, the physical eye, note about this, the first of 5 types of eyes, or 5 types of perceptive faculties. They are the physical eye, the heavenly eye, the wisdom eye, the Dharma eye, and the Buddha eye. There's further explanation in the note, you can read it on your own, the 5 kinds of eyes. Just note, world-honored one, the thus come one possesses the physical eye. Subhuti, what do you think? Does the thus come one possess the heavenly eye? Just so, world-honored one, the thus come one possesses the heavenly eye. Subhuti, what do you think? Does the thus come one possess the wisdom eye? Just so, the world-honored one, the thus come one possesses the wisdom eye. Subhuti, what do you think? Does the thus come one possess the Dharma eye? Just so, world-honored one, the thus come one possesses the Dharma eye. Subhuti, what do you think? Does the thus come one possess the Buddha eye? The 5th eye? Just so, world-honored one, the thus come one possesses the Buddha eye. Subhuti, what do you think? Regarding the sands of the Ganges, does the Buddha teach that there are sands or not? Just so, world-honored one, the thus come one teaches that there are sands. Subhuti, what do you think? Suppose there were as many Ganges rivers as there are sands in the Ganges, and suppose that there were as many Buddha worlds as there are sands in all these Ganges rivers. Would they be many or would they not? They would be many, world-honored one. The Buddha then said to Subhuti, the different types of minds possessed by the living beings in these various lands, the thus come one knows them all. Why? Because the thus come one teaches that these various types of minds are all of them not minds. So they are called minds. Why do I say this? Sabute, past mind, cannot be gotten hold of. Present mind cannot be gotten hold of. Future mind cannot be gotten hold of. And then a note here, you can never get hold of a past mind because it no longer exists. You can never get hold of a present mind because it is constantly changing. You can never get a hold of a future mind because it does not yet exist. This is one of the most famous passages of the sutra. Here in section 18, verse 18, if you want to call it verse 19. Sabute, what do you think? If a person were to fill the 1,000,000,000-fold world with the 7 treasures as an offering, would that person as a consequence gain much good fortune, or would he not? Just so, world-honored one, that person would in consequence of this gain very much good fortune. Sabute, if the good fortune were true good fortune, then the thus come one would not teach that the amount of fortune gained is great, because there is no such thing as good fortune. Therefore, the thus come one teaches that the amount of good fortune is great. 20. Sabute, what do you think? Can the fully formed material body of the Buddha be seen or not? No, world-honored one. The thus come one does not think it proper for this fully formed material body to be seen. Why? Because the thus come one teaches that the fully formed material body is not a fully formed material body. This is called the fully formed material body. Sabute, what do you think? Can the fully formed bodily marks of the thus come one be seen or not? No, world-honored one. The thus come one does not think it proper for his fully formed body marks to be seen. Why? Because the thus come one teaches that his bodily marks, when fully formed, are not fully formed. This is called bodily marks fully formed. 21. Subuti. You must not say that the thus come one entertains any such thoughts as the following. If someone should assert that I teach something that is a dharma, I reply that he should have no such thought. Why? Because if someone claims that the thus come one teaches the existence of a dharma, then he is slandering the Buddha. He is unable to understand my teachings. That is the reason. Sabute, to teach a dharma is to teach that there is no dharma that can be taught. That is the proper teaching. This is called the teaching of a dharma. At that time, the Venerable Sabute said to the Buddha, World-honored one, if the living beings of a future age hear this preaching of a dharma, will they respond with a believing mind or will they not? The Buddha said, Sabute, there are not living beings, and there are not living beings. These are not living beings, and they are not living beings. Why? Sabute, living beings, the thus come one teaches that they are not living beings. These are called living beings. 22. Sabute said to the Buddha, World-honored one, when the Buddha attained supreme and perfect enlightenment, did he attain nothing at all? Just so, Sabute. When I attained supreme and perfect enlightenment, there was not even the smallest dharma for me to attain. This is called the attainment of supreme and perfect enlightenment. 23. Furthermore, Sabute, this dharma is uniform in nature. It has no higher or lower degree. So it is called supreme and perfect enlightenment. This is because it knows no self, no being, no living creature, no individual. When one cultivates all good dharmas, then one will attain supreme and perfect enlightenment. And what are called good dharmas, the thus come one teaches are not good dharmas. These are called good dharmas. 24. Sabute, suppose a person were to gather together the 7 treasures in an amount equal to all the Mount Sumerus, king of mountains, that exist in the 1,000,000,000-fold world and offer them as alms. And suppose that another person took this perfection of wisdom sutra, or even just one 4-line verse from it, accepted it, upheld, read, recited, and taught it to others. The good fortune gained by the former person would not amount to 1 part in 100 of that gained by the latter. That gained by the latter could not be measured in hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, or millions. It would be beyond the possibility of numbers to be calculated or analogies to be expressed. Sabute, what do you think? You should never say of the thus come one that he thinks to himself, I will save living beings. Subhuti, you must not think any such thing. Why? Because in truth there are no living beings for the thus come one to save. If there were any living beings for the thus come one to save, then the thus come one would have thoughts of a self, a being, a living creature, an individual. But, Subhuti, the thus come one teaches that what has a self does not have a self. All ordinary persons believe that they have a self. Bonjing, I think, is the Japanese, in the Japanese text says bonjing, or bombu. Yeah, bombu is another word for ordinary persons, namely ordinary unenlightened persons. But Subhuti, the thus come one, teaches that ordinary persons are not ordinary persons. 26. Subhuti, what do you think? Can one use the 32 bodily marks as a means to view the thus come one, or can one not? Subhuti said to the Buddha, just so, just so. Through the 32 bodily marks one may view the thus come one. The Buddha said, if one could see the thus come one through the 32 bodily marks, then a wheel-turning king would be a thus come one. There's a footnote about that, you can read that on your own. Subhuti said to the Buddha, then if I understand the Buddha's teachings correctly, one should not be able to view the thus come one through the 32 bodily marks. At that time the world-honored one recited this verse. Those who look for me in forms, who seek me in the sound of a voice, those persons walk an erroneous way. They can never see the thus come one. 27. Subhuti, suppose you were to think it is not because the thus come one was fully endowed with the bodily marks that he was able to attain supreme and perfect enlightenment. Subhuti, you should never think it was not because the thus come one was fully endowed with the bodily marks that he was able to gain supreme and perfect enlightenment. Or Subhuti, suppose you were to think that those who wish to attain supreme and perfect enlightenment teach that one should assume the marks of a one who cuts off and annihilates all dharmas. Assume the marks of one who cuts off and annihilates all dharmas. You should not think such a thought. Why? Because those who have set their minds on the attainment of supreme and perfect enlightenment do not teach that with regard to the dharmas one should assume the marks of one who cuts off or annihilates them. 28. Subhuti, suppose a bodhisattva were to fill as many worlds as there are sands in the Ganges with the 7 treasures and offer them as alms. And suppose there were a person who understood that all dharmas are without a self and thus were able to carry out the paramita of forbearance. The blessings gained by this person would exceed those of the bodhisattva just described. Subhuti, this is because the bodhisattvas do not receive good fortune. Subhuti said to the Buddha, world-honored one, why do the bodhisattvas not receive good fortune? Subhuti, the bodhisattvas must not be greedy to receive good fortune for their actions. That is why I teach that they do not receive good fortune. 29. Subhuti, if there is a person who says, the thus come one, he comes, he goes, he sits, he lies down. There's a footnote here about the thus come one, kind of late in the translation to include the footnote. It should be up there in the beginning. But Watson writes, the thus come one, or the Tathagata is the Sanskrit word, in Japanese Nyorai, right? The thus come one, or Tathagata or Nyorai, is one of the 10 honorable titles of a Buddha. Okay, this is the highest Buddha, the Nyorai, the thus come one, and there are 10 titles for this Buddha, highest ranking Buddha. Tathagata can mean either thus come one or thus gone one, right? He is gone. Gone is probably a better translation. Thus gone one, because he has gone to that other world, or that world of Nihang, or Nirvana, or enlightenment outside of the cycle of samsara. He's one who has left the cycle of samsara, who is gedatsud from samsara. The word thus indicates suchness, or the true nature of reality, from which a Buddha comes and into which he goes. So the Chinese character for suchness is gotoshi, right? Nyo. In Japanese, gotoshi or nyo. Here the Buddha himself comments on the meaning of the title. Okay, so again, 29. Sabuti, if there is a person who says, the thus come one, he comes, he goes, he sits, he lies down, then that person does not understand the meaning of my teachings. Why? Because the thus come one has nowhere he comes from and nowhere he goes. Therefore, he is called the thus come one. Okay, so he exists outside of space, the thus come one. 30. Sabuti, suppose good men and good women were to take the 1,000,000,000-fold world and pound it into fine dust. What do you think? Would the fine dust particles be many or not? Very many, world-honored one. Why? Because if these many dust particles really existed, then the Buddha would not teach that they are dust particles. Why do I say this? The Buddha teaches that dust particles are not dust particles. These are called dust particles. Okay, so we see this formula again and again. It's probably the 100th time that it's appeared. The Buddha teaches that X is not X, right? And this X not being X, equals the original conventionally understood X. World-honored one, the thus come one teaches that the 1,000,000,000-fold world is not a world. This is called a world. So again, the same formula here about the world though. The million-fold world. This is called a world. Why? If one believed that the world really existed, this would be the mark of an attachment to an entity. But the thus come one teaches that the mark of an attachment to an entity is not the mark of an attachment to an entity. This is called the mark of an attachment to an entity. Okay? So we see this radical process of negation of everything, right? An unfolding process of negation after negation after negation, and that's in that long process of negation is where the truth lies. So a lot of people in commenting on this compare it to Hegel's dialectical method, writing on the Diamond Sutra. Continuing, Sabuti, the mark of an attachment to an entity must not be taught. But ordinary people in their greed are attached to such a mark. 31. Sabuti, suppose someone were to say that the Buddha teaches views such as a view of a self, a being, a living creature, or an individual. Sabuti, what do you think? Has this person understood the meaning of my teachings, or has he not? World-honored one, this person has not understood the meaning of thus come one's teachings. Why? The world-honored one teaches that views such as those of self, a being, a living creature, or an individual are not views of the self, a being, a living creature, or an individual. These are called views of a self, a being, a living creature, or an individual. Okay, A is conventionally understood. Then the thus come one says that A is not A. And then the third part of that formula is the A not being A is therefore the A. Right? Sabuti, those who have set their minds on the attainment of supreme and perfect enlightenment should, with regard to all dharmas, understand them in this way, view them in this way, believe and interpret them in this way, and not suppose there is something that has the appearance of a dharma. Sabuti, what I have termed the appearance of a dharma, the thus come one teaches that it is not the appearance of a dharma. This is called the appearance of a dharma. 32. Suppose there were a person who filled the world's countless asamkhya in number, countless in number, filled the world's countless in number with the 7 treasures, and took them and offered them as alms. And suppose that good men and good women, having set their minds on becoming bodhisattvas, took this sutra, even just one 4-line verse of it, accepted, upheld, read, and recited and preached and expounded it to others. The good fortune they received would exceed that of that other person. And how should they proceed and expound it to others? Never troubling about in appearances, in accordance with suchness, unmoving. Why? And then in verse here, because all conditioned dharmas are like dreams, phantoms, bubbles, shadows, like dew, or again like lightning, in this way should you view them. Okay, that's the verse there. Note that a lot of these images here made their way into Japanese poetry and became sort of central metaphors, central motifs of classical Japanese poetry. Dreams, yume, phantoms, maboros, genso, bubbles awa, right, or utakata in the classical way to say bubbles, utakata no gotoshi. These are all images that come from the Buddhist sutras that made their way into Japan many of them in the Nara period. Bubbles, shadows like dew, tsuyu, of course, is a major metaphor motif in classical Japanese poetry. You see tsuyu all the time. Or again, like lightning too, kaminari, right? In this way, you should view them. And he has a note there about the Sanskrit version being slightly different. Remember, Watson is translating from Japanese translation of the sutra. And then the final paragraph here. When the Buddha had finished preaching this sutra, the elder monk Sabuti, along with the monks, nuns, male and female lay believers, and the heavenly and human beings and asuras in all the worlds, having heard the preaching of the Buddha, were all filled with great delight and joy. They believed, accepted, honored, and carried out this Diamond Perfection of Wisdom Sutra. Okay, and now the glossary. Okay, these are all the major terms and concepts that appear in the work. It's very important that we wrap our heads around all of them. Emptiness, or sometimes translated as non-dualism. Sunyata, which we just saw and discussed in the Heart Sutra already. In Japanese, ku, kanji for ku, sora, right? Ku, Chinese say gong. Emptiness of non-dualism. The Buddhist doctrine that declares that because all things are conditioned in nature, brought into existence and governed by specific causes and conditions, and hence in a constant state of flux, they lack any inherent or abiding identity. The only thing that can be said of them is that they are empty of fixed characteristics. By this, Buddhism does not mean that they do not exist, but simply that they are unworthy of becoming the object of clinging or attachment. Right? Shuchaku, clinging or attachment, which is the obstruction that keeps you from seeing things as they truly are. Right? And because they all share this one quality of emptiness, Mahayana goes on to assert that seemingly opposing concepts such as samsara, rinne in Japanese, the world of suffering and cyclical birth and death, and the world of nirvana, or nehang in Japanese, are in the end identical. Okay, so samsara and nehang, which are conventionally thought of as antithetical or opposing realms or ideas, are in the end identical. And that if we would only realize this fact, earthly desires are identical with the state of enlightenment. Bonno and satori are in fact the same thing, according to this very radical sutra and radical reading of the Buddhist texts, right? So all the antithetical ideas that we have in our mind are just conventions, and in fact they are two sides of the same coin, as it were. Latter day of the law. Japanese say mappo, right? Chinese say ma-fa, I think. The last of the three periods which the teachings of the Buddha passed through after his death, right? And we've talked about in another video, the three stages are, what are they? Shobo, followed by the counterfeit law. Shobo is the original correct days of the law, the shobo, followed by Gibo, I think it was. We'll have to check about that, but it's the counterfeit laws. And then the third stage is the last stage that we're in right now. We're still in. We've been in it for over 1,000 years. This is the Mappo period. In this period, the teachings of Buddha lose their power to lead people to enlightenment, right? So people have forgotten the law, the Buddhist law. And it is said to last for 10,000 years more. So we have 10,000 years or more. So we have at least 9,000 more years to go in this stage of latter day of the law. 7 treasures, which appeared several times in this sutra. These are the 7 precious substances mentioned in the Buddha scriptures. The list varies from text to text, but it is often given as gold, silver, lapis lazuli, seashell, agate, I think it is, pearl, and carnelian. Okay. Moving on, the 6 paramitas, or the 6 perfections. These are the 6 practices required of Mahayana bodhisattvas in order to attain Buddhahood. So remember, a bodhisattva has not yet attained Buddhahood. He's almost able to do so, but he or she still comes back into the world to save the enlightened, or to save or help the non-enlightened souls. And in order to get to that next stage of Nyorai, the thus come one, it helps to practice these 6 perfections. The Sanskrit word paramita means perfection, or having reached the other shore. That is, having crossed over from the shore of delusion to that of enlightenment. And the 6 practices are the following: almsgiving, including material almsgiving, almsgiving of the law or doctrine, and almsgiving of fearlessness. So there's 3 types of almsgiving. 2, the keeping of the precepts. 3, forbearance, or bearing up patiently under opposition and hardship and oppression. 4, assiduousness, or diligence in practice. 5, meditation. And 6, wisdom. Right. Next, skandhas. These are referred to as the heaps or the aggregates, the 5 components that we saw in the Heart Sutra. Right. I think it was goong was the word that was given there in the Heart Sutra. The 5 heaps or aggregates, that are the 5 components that constitute the makeup of all living things, and these things are, in fact, have no ultimate or abiding reality, but are, in fact, consist only of emptiness. The first of the 5 is form, or shiki, se in Chinese, the kanji for color, the physical aspect of the living being. The second is perception. The third is conception. The fourth is volition, or will. The fifth is consciousness. The English translations of the 5 Sanskrit terms are not standardized, so you might see different translations in different texts. But just keep in mind that there are 5 aggregates that make up the human being, and these consist not of any kind of ultimate reality, but only of emptiness in the end. 10 titles of a Buddha. Okay, so these are the 10 epithets traditionally applied to a Buddha, someone who's achieved the highest stage of existence, the Nyorai stage. The first term is Nyorai, or thus come one. Another is worthy of offerings, of right and universal knowledge, perfect clarity in conduct, well gone, understanding the world, excelling worthy, unexcelled worthy, trainer of people, teacher of heavenly and human beings, and simply Hotoke-sama in Japanese, or Buddha, world honored one. Okay, the 32 marks. Remarkable physical characteristics possessed by great beings such as Buddha and wheel-turning kings. So this phrase, 32 marks, 32 bodily marks, appeared many times in the sutra. We saw it elsewhere as well. They are flat soles, markings of the wheel of the law on the soles, long slender fingers, broad flat heels, webbed feet and hands, extremely flexible limbs, protuberant insteps, slender legs like those of a deer, hands that extend past the knees even when standing, concealed genitals, body height equal to an arm span, body hair that turns upward, one hair growing from each pore, golden skin, light radiating from the body, thin pliant skin, well-developed muscles in hands, feet, shoulders, nape of neck, muscles developed there, well-developed muscles below armpits, dignified torso like a lion, large straight body, substantial shoulders, 40 teeth, even teeth, 4 white fangs, full cheeks like those of a lion, unexcelled sense of taste, long broad tongue, voice that can reach to the Brahma heaven, eyes the color of blue lotus blossoms, long eyelashes like those of a cow, protuberant knot of flesh like a top knot on crown of head, tuft of white hair between the eyebrows curling to the right. Okay. Moving on, the 1,000,000,000-fold world is a major world system in ancient Indian cosmology. A world consists of a Mount Sumeru, its surrounding seas and mountains, heavenly bodies, and so forth, extending upward to the first meditation heaven in the world of form, and downward to the cycle of wind that forms the basis of a world. 1,000 such worlds make up a minor world system. 1,000 minor world systems constitute an intermediate world system, and 1,000 intermediate world systems form a major world system. One major world system therefore comprises 1 billion worlds. there were thought to be countless world systems in the universe. Okay. Next, the three bodies of a Buddha are the Dharma body, or the body of the law, the fundamental truth or law to which a Buddha is enlightened. 2 is the reward body, obtained as a reward for completing bodhisattva practices and acquiring the Buddha wisdom. Unlike the Dharma body, which is immaterial, the reward body is thought of as an actual body, but one that is transcendent and imperceptible to ordinary people. And the 3rd is the manifested body, or the physical form that a Buddha assumes in this world in order to save people. Generally, a Buddha was believed to possess one of the 3 bodies. Wisdom, very important word in Japanese, is chie. Here in Sanskrit is prajna, the wise way of looking at the nature of all things. Because it sees them as all things as conditioned in nature, constantly changing and hence empty of any abiding nature, it regards them as unworthy of any craving or attachment. Possession of such wisdom leads to a state of enlightenment, and hence is regarded as the source of all Buddhas. Alright, that's the end of the translation and the glossary in Burton Watson's translation of the Diamond Sutra. This was published, by the way, in 2010. The Eastern Buddhist is the name of the journal in which it appears, on pages 67 to 100, published by the Eastern Buddhist Society. And Burton Watson, of course, was the great translator. He lived most of his life, or the last half of his life, in Tokyo. I never had the privilege of meeting him, but he was good friends with my former advisor from back in graduate school in the United States, and he has done a lot of great work in the field, and his translations rank as among the best in Japan studies and Chinese studies and Buddhist studies especially. I think he himself was a Buddhist, and he passed away a few years ago. Alright. In the second video, we will be delving into this text a little bit more in depth. We'll talk about the origins and the development of the work, its importation into China, and then also finally into Japan, and then various interpretations of the work. That is all for now. If you have any questions, send me an email. Goodbye.